The gunshot echoed across the valley just as Beatrice Zimmerman stepped onto her porch with a cup of coffee. And in that single crack of sound, she knew her peaceful morning had shattered into 1,000 dangerous pieces. She set the cup down carefully, her hands already reaching for the rifle she kept by the door. Her father had taught her to shoot before she could write her own name, and in the 3 years since she had inherited this land in Pinos Altos, New Mexico, she had never once regretted that skill. The year was 1882, and a woman alone on a ranch was already vulnerable enough without being defenseless. Another shot rang out, closer this time, coming from the direction of the creek that ran through the eastern edge of her property. Beatrice moved quickly down the steps, her boots kicking up dust as she crossed the yard. The sun was barely above the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that would have been beautiful if her heart was not pounding so hard. She could hear voices now, rough and laughing, and the sound made her jaw tighten. She knew what this was. Poachers had been a problem in the territory for months, men who did not care about property lines or the law, who took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake. She moved through the scrub brush, keeping low, using the terrain the way her father had taught her. When she finally got close enough to see them, her stomach dropped. There were 4 of them, rough-looking men with guns drawn, standing over a freshly killed deer. But that was not what made her blood run cold. They were not just poaching. They were setting up camp, their horses tied nearby, their gear spread out like they planned to stay. "Get off my land," Beatrice called out, raising her rifle to her shoulder. Her voice was steady even though her hands wanted to shake. The 4 men turned, and for a moment they just stared at her. Then the biggest one, a man with a scar across his cheek, started to laugh. "Well, would you look at that? Little lady thinks she can tell us what to do." "This is my property," Beatrice said, her finger resting against the trigger guard. "You are trespassing and you are poaching. Leave now, or I will ride to town and bring the sheriff back here." "Sheriff is 3 hours away, sweetheart," another man said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. "Lot can happen in 3 hours." They were spreading out, she realized, flanking her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept the rifle steady, aimed at the big man's chest. She was a good shot, better than most men, but there were 4 of them and one of her. Even if she got one, the others would be on her before she could reload. "I would not do that if I were you," a new voice said, low and dangerous, cutting through the tension like a knife. Everyone froze. Beatrice did not dare take her eyes off the men in front of her, but she could see movement in her peripheral vision. A man on horseback, emerging from the trees on the far side of the clearing. He sat tall in the saddle, his hat pulled low over his eyes, and even from a distance she could see the glint of the gun in his hand. "Who the hell are you?" the scarred man demanded. "Name is Jackson Lawson," the stranger said, guiding his horse forward with easy confidence. "And you are on the lady's property with guns drawn, which makes this my business." "This does not concern you, cowboy," the tobacco spitter said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. Jackson swung down from his horse in one smooth motion, and now Beatrice could see him properly. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes that were a startling shade of blue even in the early morning light. He moved like a man who knew how to handle himself, his gun held loosely but ready. "Sure it does," Jackson said calmly. "See, I do not much care for men who threaten women, call it a character flaw." The 4 poachers were looking at each other now, doing the math. 2 guns against 4 should have been in their favor, but there was something about Jackson's stance, the quiet confidence in his voice, that made them hesitate. "We are just hunting," the scarred man said, but he was already backing toward his horse. "On private property," Jackson said. With the lady telling you to leave, seems pretty clear-cut to me. You have got about 10 seconds to mount up and ride out, or we can settle this another way. Your choice." For a long moment, nobody moved. Beatrice could hear her own heartbeat in her ears, could feel the sweat on her palms despite the cool morning air. Then the scarred man cursed under his breath and jerked his head toward the horses. "This is not over," he said, glaring at Beatrice. "Oh, I think it is," Jackson said, and something in his tone made it clear he was not making an idle threat. "Because if I see any of you on this property again, or anywhere near this lady, I will make sure the sheriff knows exactly who has been doing all that poaching in the territory. And I am real good with descriptions. Real good with remembering faces, too." The men grabbed their gear with angry, jerky movements, leaving the dead deer where it lay. They mounted up, the scarred man shooting one last venomous look over his shoulder before spurring his horse into a gallop. The others followed, and within moments, the thunder of hoofbeats was fading into the distance. Beatrice finally let herself lower the rifle, her arms trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. She took a deep breath, then another, trying to steady herself. When she looked up, Jackson was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Thank you," she said, and her voice came out rougher than she intended. "I had the situation under control, but I appreciate the help." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You did have it under control. I just helped even the odds a bit." She studied him, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere like something from a dime novel. He was younger than she had first thought, maybe 25 or 26, only a few years older than her own 23. There was dust on his clothes and weariness in the lines around his eyes, but there was also kindness there, and something else she could not quite name. "What are you doing on my property, Mr. Lawson?" she asked, more curious than accusatory now. "Riding through," he said, holstering his gun. "I saw the poachers heading this way yesterday, thought they might be planning something. When I heard the shots this morning, I figured I should check it out." "You were watching them, following them," he corrected. "They have been causing trouble all through the territory. I have been trying to track them for the better part of a week." He glanced at the dead deer, his expression hardening. "Looks like I was right to be concerned." Beatrice felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something that had nothing to do with the morning sun. This man had gone out of his way to help her, had put himself in danger for a woman he did not even know. That was not something you saw every day, not out here where most people were too concerned with their own survival to worry about anyone else. "Well, you have my thanks," she said. "And since you probably have not had breakfast, the least I can do is offer you a meal before you ride out." Jackson's smile widened, transforming his whole face. "I would not want to impose." "It is not an imposition if I am offering," Beatrice said, surprised by how much she meant it. "Besides, I make the best biscuits in Pino's Altos. It would be a shame for you to miss out." He laughed at that, a warm, genuine sound that made something flutter in her stomach. "Well, when you put it like that, how can I refuse?" They walked back to the house together, Jackson leading his horse. Beatrice found herself acutely aware of him beside her. The way he moved with an easy grace, the way he kept scanning the horizon like he was still watching for threats. She wanted to know more about him, this cowboy who had appeared at exactly the right moment. Wanted to know where he came from, where he was going, why he had spent a week tracking poachers through the New Mexico territory. The ranch house was small but well kept, a single-story building with a wide porch and shutters her father had painted blue the summer before he died. Beatrice had kept it up as best she could, but there was always more work than hours in the day. Jackson tied his horse to the rail and followed her inside, removing his hat as he crossed the threshold. "Nice place," he said, looking around the main room with its simple furniture and clean, swept floors. "It was my father's," Beatrice said, moving to the stove to stoke the fire. "He built it himself back in '68, left it to me when he passed 3 years ago. He raised you alone." "My mother died when I was 7. Fever." She said it matter-of-factly, the way she always did. The grief had dulled over the years, becoming something she carried rather than something that carried her. "It was just the two of us after that." Jackson nodded, understanding in his eyes. "My parents died when I was 15. Comanche raid in Texas. I have been on my own since then." "I am sorry," Beatrice said softly, and meant it. "Long time ago now," he said, but she could hear the old pain underneath the words. "You learn to keep moving forward." She mixed the biscuit dough in comfortable silence, aware of him watching her work. It should have made her nervous, having a strange man in her house, but somehow it did not. There was something steady about Jackson Lawson, something that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since her father died. "So what brings you to Pino's Altos?" she asked as she cut out the biscuits and arranged them on a pan. "Besides tracking poachers, I mean." "Looking for work, mostly," Jackson said. "I have been moving around the territory for a few years now, working ranches, doing odd jobs. Heard there might be opportunities in this area." Beatrice slid the pan into the oven and turned to face him. "Can you handle cattle?" "Born and raised on a ranch in Texas," he said. "I can rope, brand, break horses, pretty much anything that needs doing." She bit her lip, thinking. She had been trying to manage the ranch alone for 3 years now, and it was getting harder every season. The fence line needed mending, the barn roof was starting to leak, and she had twice as many cattle as she could properly manage by herself. She hired help when she could afford it, but good ranch hands were hard to find, and the ones who were willing to work for a woman were even rarer. "I could use help around here," she said slowly. "I cannot pay much, but there is a bunkhouse out back. It is not fancy, but it is clean and dry. 3 meals a day and whatever wages I can manage at the end of each month." Jackson's eyebrows rose. "You are offering me a job." "You did just save me from 4 armed poachers," Beatrice pointed out. "Seems like you might be worth keeping around." He laughed again, and she decided she liked the sound of it very much. "When you put it like that, it would be downright rude to refuse. So that is a yes." "That is a yes," Jackson confirmed, his blue eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you, Miss Zimmerman. I will earn my keep, I promise you that." "Call me Beatrice," she said. "If we are going to be working together, we might as well dispense with the formalities." "Beatrice," he said, testing her name on his tongue like it was something precious. "Then you should call me Jackson." The biscuits came out perfect, golden and flaky, and Beatrice served them with butter and honey alongside eggs and bacon. They ate at the small kitchen table, and she found herself relaxing in a way she rarely did around people. Jackson was easy to talk to, his stories about his travels through the territory both entertaining and enlightening. He had worked ranches from Texas to Colorado, had seen drought and plenty, had witnessed the slow transformation of the West from wild frontier to something approaching civilization. "You ever miss having a place to call home?" Beatrice asked as she cleared the plates. Jackson was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing patterns on the worn wood of the table. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I learned a long time ago that home is not always a place. Sometimes it is just a feeling, a sense of belonging somewhere. And you have not found that feeling yet." He looked up at her, and there was something in his eyes that made her heart skip. "I am starting to think maybe I just did." The words hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Beatrice felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she did not look away. There was an honesty in Jackson's gaze that made her want to be brave, to acknowledge the connection she felt sparking to life between them. "I should show you the bunkhouse," she said finally, her voice a little breathless. "And then we can go over what needs doing around here." The next few weeks fell into a rhythm that felt almost frighteningly natural. Jackson proved to be as good as his word, working from sunup to sundown with a skill and dedication that impressed her. He mended the fence line, patched the barn roof, and helped her move the cattle to better grazing. But more than that, he was good company. They ate their meals together, talking about everything and nothing, sharing the kind of easy conversation that usually took years to develop. Beatrice found herself looking forward to seeing him each morning, found her gaze drifting to where he worked in the fields. He was beautiful in motion, all lean muscle and confident grace, and she was not so naive that she did not recognize the attraction growing between them. But it was more than just physical. Jackson made her laugh, made her feel less alone. He listened when she talked about her dreams for the ranch, offered suggestions without ever being condescending. He treated her like an equal, like someone whose opinion mattered, and that was rarer than gold in her experience. One evening, about a month after Jackson had arrived, they were sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains when he suddenly went still beside her. "What is it?" Beatrice asked, following his gaze. "Riders," he said quietly. "3 of them coming from the east." Beatrice's stomach tightened. She could see them now too, 3 dark shapes against the golden light. As they got closer, she recognized the horses, then the men, and her blood ran cold. "It is them," she said. "The Poachers, 3 of them anyway." Jackson was already on his feet, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Get inside, Beatrice." "This is my ranch," she said, standing too. "I am not hiding." He looked like he wanted to argue, but there was not time. The riders were already pulling up in front of the house, the scarred man in the lead. His face was twisted with anger, and Beatrice could smell whiskey on him even from several feet away. "Remember me," he called out, his words slightly slurred. "You and your cowboy cost us a good hunting ground. Cost us money." "You were trespassing," Beatrice said, keeping her voice level despite the fear coursing through her. "I had every right to make you leave." "You had no right," the man spat. "This land should not belong to some woman playing at ranching. Should be in the hands of men who know what to do with it." Jackson stepped forward, putting himself slightly in front of Beatrice. "I thought I made myself clear last time. You are not welcome here. Ride out now and we will forget this ever happened." "Or what?" one of the other men challenged. "There are 3 of us and 2 of you. Odds are better this time." "Odds do not mean much when you are drunk and stupid," Jackson said calmly. "And I am betting your friend, the one who is not here, decided he wanted no part of whatever revenge plan you cooked up. Smart man." The scarred man's face flushed darker. "You think you are real clever, do not you? Think you can just waltz in here and play hero?" "I think I am going to give you one last chance to turn around and leave," Jackson said, and his voice had gone cold and hard. "After that, things are going to get real unpleasant for you." Beatrice saw the scarred man's hand move toward his gun, and everything happened very fast after that. Jackson drew in a blur of motion, his gun clearing the holster and firing before the poacher had even gotten his weapon fully raised. The shot took the man's hat clean off his head, and he yelped in shock, his horse rearing. "Next one goes somewhere more permanent," Jackson said, his gun now trained on the second man who had frozen with his hand halfway to his own weapon. "I suggest you collect your friend and ride out. And here is the thing you need to understand. If any of you ever come back here, if I ever hear that you have bothered Beatrice again, I will not be so generous. I will track you down, and I will make sure the law knows everything about your little poaching operation. Every ranch you have hit, every animal you have killed. I have been keeping notes, see? Names, dates, descriptions would make for real interesting reading for the territorial marshal. The men looked at each other, fear and anger warring on their faces. But Jackson's gun was steady, and there was something in his eyes that made it clear he was not bluffing. "You are crazy," the scarred man said, but he was already backing his horse up. "Maybe," Jackson agreed, "but I am crazy with good aim and a long memory. So ask yourself if whatever grudge you are carrying is worth spending the next 10 years in a territorial prison." The poachers turned their horses and rode out, moving fast, and this time Beatrice knew they would not be back. Jackson had not just driven them off. He had broken whatever courage they had mustered to return. She let out a breath she had not realized she was holding, her legs suddenly shaky. Jackson holstered his gun and turned to her, concern written across his face. "Are you all right?" he asked, his hands hovering near her shoulders like he wanted to touch her but was not sure if he should. "I am fine," Beatrice said, but her voice shook. "You really have been keeping notes on them." A slight smile crossed his face. "I have been keeping mental notes. But they do not need to know that. The threat is real enough whether it is written down or not." Without thinking, Beatrice stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He stiffened for just a moment, surprised, and then his arms came around her, pulling her close. She could feel his heart beating against her cheek, could feel the warmth of him, solid and real and safe. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For staying, for protecting this place, for protecting me." "Beatrice," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. He pulled back just enough to look down at her, one hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You do not need to thank me for that. I would not let anything happen to you. Not now, not ever." She looked up at him, at the face that had become so dear to her over the past weeks, and saw her own feelings reflected back in his eyes. "Jackson," she started, but he was already bending down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle at first, tentative, a question being asked and answered. But then Beatrice rose on her toes, her hands sliding up to tangle in his hair, and the kiss deepened into something more urgent. Something that tasted like loneliness ending and longing being fulfilled, like two people who had been wandering finally finding where they belonged. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jackson rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that since the day I met you," he admitted. "Then why did you wait so long?" Beatrice asked, and she could not keep the smile off her face. "Because I wanted to be sure," he said. "Sure that this was real, that it was not just gratitude or convenience or loneliness. I have moved around so much, Beatrice. I did not want to let myself feel this way about you if there was any chance I would just end up leaving." "And now?" she asked, her heart hammering. "Now I know I am not going anywhere," Jackson said firmly. "Not unless you want me to. This place, this ranch, you are what I have been looking for all these years. You are home." Beatrice felt tears prick her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. "I know it has only been a month, and that probably sounds crazy, but I do. I love you, Jackson Lawson." His smile was brilliant, bright enough to rival the setting sun. "It does not sound crazy at all, because I love you too. Have since the moment I saw you standing in that clearing with your rifle raised, brave and fierce and not backing down for anything." They kissed again, slower this time, savoring it. And when they finally went inside, Jackson's hand warm in hers, Beatrice felt like her life was finally beginning. Like all the lonely years since her father's death had just been a prelude to this moment, this man, this feeling of completeness. The months that followed were the happiest of Beatrice's life. She and Jackson worked the ranch together, partners in every sense of the word. They talked about the future, about expanding the herd, about building a bigger house someday when they could afford it. And when Jackson proposed on a cool October evening, getting down on one knee in the barn while they were checking on a mare about to foal, Beatrice said yes, before he even finished asking the question. They were married in Pinos Altos in early December, a simple ceremony at the small church with half the town in attendance. Beatrice wore her mother's dress, carefully preserved all these years, and Jackson wore a new suit that he had bought specially for the occasion. The preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and when Jackson kissed her, the assembled crowd cheered loud enough to rattle the rafters. The ranch prospered under their joint management. Jackson's experience and Beatrice's determination made for a formidable combination. They hired on 2 more hands the following spring, good men who respected Beatrice and did not mind taking orders from a woman. The herd grew, the land flourished, and slowly but surely, they built something lasting. In the summer of 1884, Beatrice gave birth to their first child, a son they named William after her father. Jackson cried when he held his son for the first time, this tough cowboy reduced to tears of joy and wonder. Beatrice watched him with their baby, saw the gentleness in his big hands, the love in his eyes, and fell in love with him all over again. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, red-faced and squalling and perfect. They named her Sarah, and she had her father's blue eyes and her mother's stubborn chin. Jackson doted on both his children, teaching William to ride almost as soon as the boy could walk, dancing around the kitchen with Sarah in his arms until she shrieked with laughter. The Poachers never returned. Word had spread through the territory about what had happened, about the cowboy who had run them off and the threats he had made. Whether Jackson had actually reported them to the territorial marshal, no one knew, but the Poachers had moved on to easier targets, and eventually, the law caught up with them in Colorado. The scarred man ended up in prison, just as Jackson had promised, and the others scattered to the winds. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle lost to disease and crops that failed. But through it all, Beatrice and Jackson faced everything together. They were partners, lovers, best friends. They argued sometimes, as all couples do, but they always worked it out. Always came back to the foundation of love and respect that had been there from the beginning. On their 10th anniversary, Jackson surprised her with a new house. Not the grand mansion she had sometimes dreamed about, but a proper 2-story home with enough bedrooms for their growing family and a wide porch that overlooked the valley. He had been planning it for years, saving money and drawing up designs, working with a carpenter in town to make it perfect. "Do you like it?" he asked anxiously as he led her through the empty rooms, pointing out where the furniture would go, where they would hang curtains. "Like it," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face. "Jackson, it is perfect. It is everything I could have wanted." "You are everything I could have wanted," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You saved me, Beatrice. Before I met you, I was just drifting, no purpose, no home. You gave me all of that. You gave me a reason to stay in one place, to build something, to be more than just a cowboy passing through." "We saved each other," Beatrice corrected, resting her head on his shoulder. "I was so lonely before you came, so tired of trying to do everything alone. You gave me partnership, love, a family. You gave me everything I did not even know I needed." They moved into the new house that spring, and Beatrice loved every inch of it. Loved the big kitchen where she could cook, the parlor where they gathered in the evenings, the bedrooms where her children dreamed. But most of all, she loved the master bedroom, the big bed she shared with Jackson, the intimacy of falling asleep in his arms every night and waking up beside him every morning. The years continued to pass, measured in birthdays and harvests and small triumphs. William grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. Sarah was wild and fearless, always climbing trees and racing her horse across the fields. In 1890, another son arrived, Samuel, who had his mother's dark eyes and his father's easy smile. Beatrice sometimes thought about that morning when she had heard gunshots and found poachers on her property. Thought about how different her life would have been if Jackson had not appeared when he did. She would have survived, probably. She was tough enough, capable enough. But surviving was not the same as living, not the same as this fullness, this joy. "What are you thinking about?" Jackson asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch of their house, watching the sun set just as they had done so many years ago on the porch of the old ranch house. Their children were inside, the sounds of their laughter drifting through the open windows. "That morning," Beatrice said, "when you rode up and saved me from those poachers." Jackson snorted. "You did not need saving, you had everything under control." "Maybe," she allowed, "but I needed you. I just did not know it yet." He took her hand, lacing their fingers together. His hands were rougher now, more weathered, but his touch was as gentle as ever. "I needed you too, still do, always will." "Always," Beatrice agreed, leaning her head on his shoulder. As the sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Beatrice reflected on the life they had built together. The ranch was thriving. Their children were healthy and happy, and she was deeply, completely in love with her husband. It was more than she had dared to dream of all those years ago when she was alone and struggling. Jackson pressed a kiss to the top of her head, and she felt him smile against her hair. "I love you, Beatrice Lawson." "I love you too," she murmured, "more than I could ever say." They sat there until the stars came out, until the children called them inside for dinner, until the day faded into the comfortable routine of their life together. A life built on a foundation of courage and trust, on a moment when a cowboy had ridden up to help a woman in trouble and had found his home in her eyes. And every night, as Beatrice fell asleep in Jackson's arms, she gave thanks for that morning, for those gunshots that had led her to the love of her life. Because sometimes, she thought, the most frightening moments could lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Sometimes, danger could bring exactly what you needed most. The ranch continued to grow over the years. By 1895, it was one of the most successful operations in the territory, known for quality cattle and honest dealing. William, now 11, was already showing signs of being a natural rancher, following his father everywhere and absorbing every lesson. Sarah, at 9, was the best rider in the family, fearless on horseback. And Samuel, at 5, was the charmer, able to talk his way out of trouble with a smile and a well-timed compliment. Jackson had softened over the years, the hard edges worn away by love and family, but he was still the man Beatrice had fallen in love with. Still protective, still capable, still the first person she wanted to see in the morning and the last at night. They had grown together, adapted to each other's rhythms, learned the particular language of their marriage. On a warm summer evening in 1896, the family gathered for dinner in the big kitchen. Beatrice had cooked Jackson's favorite meal, pot roast with potatoes and carrots and fresh bread still warm from the oven. The children were rowdy, talking over each other about their day, and Jackson caught Beatrice's eye across the table with a smile that said he would not trade this chaos for anything. After dinner, after the children were settled in bed, Jackson and Beatrice walked out to the barn together. It was their habit, this evening walk, a way to check on the animals and steal a few moments alone. "I have been thinking," Jackson said as they stood in the barn doorway, looking out at the stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, "about hiring another hand or two. The ranch is getting too big for just the three of us to manage properly." "I think that is a good idea," Beatrice agreed. "And maybe we should think about buying that parcel of land to the south. Peterson mentioned he might be willing to sell. Building an empire, are we?" Jackson teased, but there was pride in his voice. "We are building a legacy," Beatrice corrected. "Something to pass down to our children and their children, proof that we were here, that we mattered." Jackson turned to her, pulling her into his arms. "You matter," he said seriously. "To me, to our children, to this whole territory. You matter, Beatrice." She kissed him then, pouring 14 years of love into it, all the gratitude and passion and partnership they had shared. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Come on," Beatrice said, taking his hand. "Let's go back to the house. I want to fall asleep in your arms." "Best offer I have had all day," Jackson said, and they walked back together under the stars, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful from that first chance meeting. Years continued to unfold like pages in a book. William married a girl from town in 1902, a sweet-natured young woman named Elizabeth who fit into the family like she had always been there. They built a house on the far edge of the property, close enough to help with the ranch but far enough for privacy. When they gave Beatrice and Jackson their first grandchild in 1903, a baby boy they named Jackson after his grandfather, Jackson cried again, just as he had when his own children were born. Sarah shocked everyone by announcing she wanted to go to college, to study literature and become a teacher. Jackson and Beatrice supported her dream, even though it meant she would leave the ranch. She returned every summer, bringing new ideas and stories of the wider world, and eventually married a professor she met at university. They settled in Santa Fe, close enough to visit regularly. Samuel took after his father, a natural cowboy with a gift for handling horses. He stayed on the ranch, working alongside Jackson and William, learning the business from the ground up. He married in 1908, and his wife, a rancher's daughter from Silver City, was as capable with cattle as any man. Jackson and Beatrice grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces lining with the years. But the love between them never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper, richer, seasoned by decades of shared experiences and unwavering partnership. On their 30th anniversary in 1892, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Children and grandchildren filled the house, and Beatrice looked around at all of it, the noise, the love, the continuation of everything she and Jackson had built, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, she and Jackson sat on their porch again in the same spot where they had shared so many evenings. "You ever regret it?" she asked. "Staying here, you could have kept traveling, seen more of the world." Jackson turned to her, taking both her hands in his. "Beatrice, I have seen everything I need to see. It is all right here. You are my world. This family we built, this life we made together, that is my adventure, and I would not change a single moment of it, not even the scary parts." She asked with a smile, "Especially not the scary parts," he said, "because those led me to you." They kissed, and it still felt like that first time, like coming home. After 30 years, after everything they had been through, the magic was still there. As they sat together under the New Mexico stars, surrounded by the land they had worked and the legacy they had created, Beatrice thought about that morning so long ago. The morning that had changed everything. The morning a cowboy had ridden up to help her, and in doing so had given her the greatest gift imaginable, a life filled with love, purpose, and belonging. "I love you, Jackson Lawson," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Beatrice Lawson," he replied, his arm coming around her. "Today, tomorrow, and always." And there, in the quiet of the evening, with their family safe inside and the ranch prosperous around them, they sat in perfect contentment. Two souls who had found each other in the Wild West, who had faced down danger and built a dynasty, who had loved each other through every trial and triumph. Their story was not written in history books or commemorated with monuments, but it was real, and it was lasting, and it was theirs. A testament to courage, to love, to the extraordinary things that could happen when two people chose each other, day after day, year after year. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging, watching over a ranch in New Mexico, where a cowboy and the woman he loved had created their own piece of forever. And if you listened carefully, you could almost hear the echo of that first gunshot, the one that had set everything in motion. The one that had led Jackson Lawson to Beatrice Zimmerman's property at exactly the right moment, changing both their lives irrevocably and completely. In the end, that was what mattered. Not the danger or the fear, but what came after. The choice to be brave, to be open, to let love in when it appeared. And the daily decision to nurture that love, to protect it, to let it grow into something that could withstand anything the world threw at it. Jackson and Beatrice Lawson knew that better than anyone. Their love story had begun with guns drawn and danger looming, but it had become something beautiful, something eternal. A love that would endure long after they were gone, carried on in their children and grandchildren, in the land they had tended, in the legacy of partnership and respect they had modeled. And as the night deepened and they finally went inside, hand in hand as they had walked for 3 decades, they carried with them the certainty that they had found what everyone searches for. A love that transforms, that completes, that makes everything else worthwhile. Their story was complete, a circle closed, a promise kept. From that first meeting to this moment and all the moments yet to come, they were bound together. Two hearts beating as one, two lives intertwined so thoroughly that neither could imagine existing without the other. That was the true end of their story, and the true beginning. A love that conquered fear, that built empires from dust, that proved the enduring power of two people who chose each other and never looked back. In the Wild West of New Mexico, in a time when survival was uncertain and tomorrow was never guaranteed, Jackson and Beatrice Lawson had created their own certainty, their own guarantee. The unshakable knowledge that they were meant to be together, from that first morning until their last.